What's
Lucky Boys Podcast.
Welcome to Lucky Boys Podcast. I'm Will.
And I'm Norm. And we have a very special guest today, Alan King, aka Alan Chung, CEO and founder of luxury apparel brand A Kings. Welcome.
Thank you.
So good to have you. Thank you for having us in your showroom here in the Garment District.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm really happy you guys can make it out here. Welcome to the showroom.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us here. You know, I as soon as I came in, I was like, whoa, this is very interesting. The clothing, it's definitely stylish, and it makes a statement as soon as, my eyes just completely gravitate towards the colors, the texture, and some of the style. It doesn't seem like old, right? I didn't know what to expect, but it definitely seems more futuristic.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're going for, right?
Yeah.
What inspires the look?
So we actually think of it like future wear, but timeless. And a lot of it is it's very different styles, right? There's different, because if you think about New York City, there's a lot of different dialogues of people, right? So there's like Brooklyn, New York, like Midtown, LES, Chinatown. Then you have Uptown, like Harlem, Bronx, things like that, and Staten Island. And all of these cultures are, mixed, like whether you're Italian or Chinese, and all of these different backgrounds, like Black, Spanish, and everybody has a different style. So I think me growing up in New York was a huge influence of how our clothing is designed, because it's like New York's like that melting pot. So our clothing has like all these different references from all these different places, and that would probably be why sometimes like some people may feel like, oh, it's kind of a little random, but it's really like, hey, like if you look at the lifestyle of New Yorkers, we're so much like, we're so fluid. We have like, like the gym wear, and then we can go wear a pair of jeans, and then we'll wear like a trouser. It's like a very the lifestyles of so many different New Yorkers are so different. It's not like any other city. So I think that's why, like, sometimes for some people they're like, oh, like, well, this is so much going on, but it's really just like, hey, this is just how New York's lifestyle is.
Typically, what type of people do you see gravitating towards your style of clothing?
I think it's a lot of people that want to be first, and they want to stand out a little bit, but they're not really like, hey, I'm gonna be the most flamboyant person on the street, but they want to stand out, and they feel like what you wear is what represents you.
Alan, I gotta tell you, man, some of these, it's real dope. So I could see like the colors. It's you have a lot of different textures, even though, like, for example, I see like right over here, and I'll try to describe this for those listening. It's a racket full of it's all black, but it's different types of blacks. It's different textures. It's different cuts. Do you go for that dark look, or is that just one line that you want to get covered?
I think black is like the most comfortable color for sure, and it's there's so many different shades, and there's so many different materials you can use to create different looks, right? So it's definitely a color, or like that I really gravitate towards. But recently I've definitely been experimenting with more colors, and but I think New York is just, it's like everybody down the street is just wearing black. It's just that style.
Yeah, especially during the colder months like now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And over there though, across from me, and because I'm looking at you, I get distracted because there's just so much vibrancy and colors. Like I would say it's opposite of this rack right here, where it's a little more loud. It's definitely a statement. If I'm meeting up with my friends, or I'm walking into a room, I'm making a statement with this.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of the idea that you can blend both, right? So you can have like every day, but then also like, hey, you're going out and you need that statement, or you want to have that statement. A lot of our audience is like creative too, so we think like that representation is so important, and that's why like the loud colors are there. Like let's say they're performing on stage, or you just want to express yourself. And one thing that always stood out to me is like before you even say hi to somebody, right? Before that person even smiles to you, is just what you're wearing. That's what somebody sees.
The interesting part I find about this is that prior to us rolling, when we were talking earlier, you said you started when you were 15, very small.
Yeah.
And that's how it started the whole journey up until now, 8 years later, and you're very young in the game, but you found a lot of success. How did you go? What was that point where you said to yourself, like, wait, maybe I can open my own store? You know, there's an idea, but when did that actually come to fruition where you go, you know what, I need a showroom? In Soho, of all places, because that's where you got your first store.
I think for me, it's always been a visualization process. It's always been like, if there's something I want, I'm visualizing it and I'm thinking about it. And Soho was just the dream, right? Like me growing up in New York, I would go to Soho all the time. Like, this is like the height of when like Soho was just fashion capital, especially in New York. And
Yeah, the fashion mecca. Yeah.
yeah, like where, you know, like you'll see like A$AP Rocky coming up there, like Supreme's like growing really fast over there, and all the luxury stores are there, and you would just see just people would just go to hang out in Soho. It wouldn't even be
I used to hang out there all the time and do a lot of it was like New York City's it's our concrete jungle mall.
Yeah,
you know, we just went straight down, up and down Soho, Broadway.
We don't have those big ass malls with those like high ceilings.
Yeah,
and elevators.
like how people bar hop.
Yeah.
That's how we'll shop. You know, we'll store hop. You know, go and you can go somewhere with a very urban vibe, and then be in Armani.
Yeah, you
know, you could just keep jumping into these different stores, and you'll see people there along Broadway with just shopping bags, but it's has a range, as you were talking about, has just different textures. You know, you can see someone with a bag where it's a suit store, and then go and see a more urban wear, and then you would see something that's in athletics, and it'll all be in one hand.
Yeah.
Right. So I always thought that was fascinating. But how did you just get to that from a 15-year-old boy sitting at home to going, all right, let me just try a few pieces, and then growing that into a place where I can do a physical store? For
me, it's just, I always thought of it not so much in terms of the like larger goal, but I was like, hey, like this is what I want to go after, but how do I bring that goal closer? Right? Like, how do I bring that goal so it's just literally right in front of me? Because sometimes when you look at like, oh, like, man, I'm 15 and how can I get the Soho store? And you start asking yourself that, you at 15 and you've never done this, there's no way your brain's going to make up a how, you know, like a right answer, right? So for me, it just started with more like releasing pieces, trying to sell them, and then just building up more so the brand and everything before I thought of like getting an office space, right? And I think I just always considered how close as I brought the goals closer. So let's say it was like, hey, like I'm gonna release these 3 or 5 pieces, and as I brought those goals closer and closer and I did them, the confidence kind of stacked, right? And I started believing in me more and more and more and more. So I think the stacking of confidence is like probably the biggest thing for somebody starting out.
Stacking of confidence. I love that.
Yeah. I think stacking of confidence is like, you know, people when they're starting out, they don't have the experience, and it's kind of like working out in a gym. You know, it's like you're training that memory and you're training that like, wow, this is possible. So even if it's just dropping 1 piece and then 2 pieces, 3 pieces, 4, 8, 16, it just got to the point where it was like, okay, like this is consistent and this is happening, and that stacking led to, okay, let me try to just get like a little office in Soho, and for me it was just, Soho was just the dream location. And when I did that, actually it was a co-working space, because I was like, hey, like, well, I'm not completely sure this is going to work, right? But I'm going to get my foot in here and try. And it definitely felt like a huge stretch. And it was like, oh man, like, is this going to work? Like, am I just like wasting money? Could I be using this somewhere else? But once I did it, it was just something like, man, like I'm never going back.
How important does social media plays in the climate? You were telling me something about you were coming into this game where when trade shows was making that transition, where it was like very important to attend these trade shows and find buyers, right, and investors, and it's making that transitions where it's not as important anymore, and then you come to a point where the market is completely saturated. How did you navigate through all of that?
So I think in terms of social media and the importance, I feel like it's the number one tool. You know, like for me, I'm a college dropout, so it's like, hey, like social media is my way to reach people and talk to people. You know, it's like there's no better way than what I post and what I do and interact. I can just do it at scale with so many people, and it's like, if in terms of like trade shows and things like that, it's a lot of buyers now are kind of betting on, hey, will your brand succeed, right? And they're looking at, will customers back you, because they want you to make money for them. You know, they're investing in your pieces, they're buying wholesale from you, but they're not just buying it just because your clothes are cool. They're like, hey, like this brand will sell. And in order for that brand to sell, you know, they have to know like this brand is strong and they have their own customer base, and my customer is going to recognize it and believe in this product and believe in the brand, and you know, be willing to spend money on it. So especially for new brands coming up, it's like, I think that growing your own following, growing your own social media is probably the most important thing, because you have the backing, right? Where stores will start coming to you. Like last week, we just opened 2 new store accounts, and those were accounts that just called us up, and they're like, hey, like, you know, we want to stock you in our store, right? Like, how can we do wholesale with you? Let's do some business. And that was from just, you know, like one of our first accounts in LA, that was literally just a customer walks into their store and is like, hey, they're like, I think the owner is trying to sell him some jeans, and it was like $600 or something like that. And the customer was like, hey, like, wait, I wouldn't pay $600 for these. I would pay $600 for the pair of jeans I'm wearing, and they're only $300, you know? And the store owner's like, huh, like, what is that brand? And looks us up on Instagram, and basically, yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I think like that's like super powerful to have like, an audience, like, and like, especially like customers that are, you know, like, especially like to, you know, promote you. That's what happens with social media versus betting on the store. You know, that it's like, there's pros and cons, you know. If you can sell to the store immediately, there's definitely that. But I'm like, wow, like how cool is it that every person that is following the brand is rooting for the brand to succeed in that way, where, you know, they're like, hey, like, fuck those jeans. Like, oh, I don't even know if I'm supposed to curse on this.
No, you're good, man. Yeah, you're
like,
you're
oh,
good.
like, fuck those jeans, right? Like, I'm not gonna pay $600 for these, but if you have 8 Kings in your store, I'll pay for them, right? And
there's that demand from your customers and your audience.
Right. So they ended up calling us up, and, you know, that's how we got a store in LA. And I think that's what like social media really does. And it allows you to, more people to work with you, right? There's a different platform they can share it to their friends and so on.
Now, is there like a learning curve to it? Like, did you have to feel like, oh, damn, I have to get out my shell? Because I hear it on both sides.
Yeah.
I hear some people going, you know what? I got to get out my shell and put myself out there, especially if I'm trying to sell a product or build some brand awareness, versus some people going, oh man, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And this, you know, it is what it is.
There's definitely some sort of, there's a little bit of both for me, at least. Like there's a part of me that just like, shares abundantly. And I'm just like, hey, like, this is what I'm doing. And, you know, like, this is where this is the journey. And I look at it like, one of the most important phrases that I've ever heard in my life or sayings is like, you know, if your life is worth living, it's worth documenting. So for me, I look at social media as like documentation of my life, where I'm like, wow, how cool is it that I can look back 3 years and see my early prototypes from 4 or 5 years ago? Or like, how cool is it that I can see like even my first retail account, you know, and I have like timestamps of like my runways, my first trade shows, like my first pop-ups. I think that's something that is so precious to me. You know, it's almost like a journal that's out there, and even for the rest of the world to see like, hey, this is everything I've been doing.
I love the way you phrase that, and I love the way that you approach social media in that context. If your life is worth living, then it's worth documenting. That is a very important phrase, especially this day and age with social media having just so much negative connotations attached to it. And you are able to utilize it in a way that's positive for yourself, for the people that follow you, and just to build your brand as a whole. Now, you also used it to reach out to some celebrities.
So I've slid in like every possible DM. most likely.
So it's like shameless, like, oh, here's my stuff.
Like to the point where I figured out when Instagram will block you from DMs.
Oh, man. I didn't even know they can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's something where it's like, you know, with social media, you have access to technically everybody, right? You have an inbox that you, and unlike emails, it gets checked pretty frequently, surprisingly, by a lot of people. So, even if they don't open and reply to it, there are chances that they've probably seen it. Like, you know, even me, like I'll check my DMs and I don't necessarily reply to every single one, but I'll open some of them, right? And I'll reply to a set number of them. And I think it's, my thought process was kind of like, this is, what is the worst thing that can happen? You know, I walk myself through this thing, and like the worst thing that could happen is like nobody replies, and maybe they see it and like they're not interested.
And they don't say anything.
They don't say anything.
Yep.
And I wasted like 2 seconds of my life, if that's considered wasting, right? To copy and paste this message. So for me, because that was like the worst thing that would happen, I was like, oh, there's nothing to lose really. I just spend 30 minutes, an hour of my time DMing all these people, seeing what works. So the first time I did this, I think one of the first times I did this, I remember I woke up to like Ben Baller replying to, so that was something like super shocking, where he said something along the lines of like, man, like out of 700 DMs I get, I barely even open one a day. And I was just like, holy shit, Ben Baller replied. And,
Shit, wow.
you know,
Very
and I was
cool.
like, this is possible. Like there's other people I can reach. And he was super cool about it. Like he was just like, yeah, I looked at your site and, you know, really respect what you're doing. And like, I love what you're doing. So, gave me an address, gave me his sizes, and it was just like, yeah, like, and I was just like, oh shit, like man, my website. Oh, I started thinking about all these things right in the back, like, oh man, like my website.
Stacking
is-
confidence right there.
wait, this was before your website, before you had anything?
No, this is like,
this is-
I'm in the time where my website maybe is not necessarily where it is today too.
Got it.
So I started thinking about like, man, like he's seeing me. I think I was shooting my own e-commerce photos. Like I was modeling some of it. And I was like, oh man, like this man's watching me model my own photos on my website. And it was super cool though. So I just knew like, wow, like this is possible, right? Like I think I DM'd like 50 or 100 people that day. I got 3 replies. One of them was Ben Baller. I don't remember exactly which one the other 2 were, but that stood out to me so much that I was like, wow, you know what? I'm going to just DM as many people as possible, right? And then I did this on a not just celebrity level, actually. Like I met some of my best friends and like content creator photographers this way, like videographers. We even find like random models sometimes, you know, through there. And it's like a digital phone book, but you have access to everybody, right?
Yeah, we were talking about this, that people don't use business cards anymore. It's basically their IG account, you know, Instagram. This is my business card if you're a creator.
Yeah.
Or
And that's
entertainment,
entertainment.
actor, model, photographer, like it's, or create an artist. It really is your business card.
And I think it's super cool. Like, I mean, it's almost like, I remember, so the one friend that actually got me into this is his name is Dizzy, and he was like a photographer where, I think he was traveling, he was going from LA to New York, and he was DMing people that he found on an Explore page that were making content and things like that. And he just saw my page. He thought I was a photographer, and I had like one hoodie at the time. So I think I was in high school, like 17, 18. And he was like, hey man, like I'm coming to New York. I want to shoot some stuff, you know, like let's, and I think this is like years ago. So he has like 20,000 followers, 30,000 followers or something. And I have like, I think like 2,000 or 3,000 followers. And I'm just like, yeah, like, let's do it. You know, like, let's just meet up. Let's see what happens. And, he actually is like a really cool dancer, and he's super cool photographer. So he was just showing me, I got exposed to like, oh, like this is how social media works kind of through him, where he's like, hey man, like let's take a photo of this bag. And let's tag this bag company because I think they'll feature us for it. So I take a photo of his bag. The bag company features us, and I was like, oh wow, like people share, you know, reposts, and there's a whole community behind this.
Right.
As I saw that, it just was like this is how I can grow and be exposed to different kind of platforms and people, right? Like he later on ends up couple years later, like 2 years later, he's like, hey, by the way, like I just started doing full-time photography for Jason Derulo, you know, and it was just like, wow, like that's crazy. Like I just met you from Instagram 2 years ago. We're just hanging out, shooting photos at World Trade before all the ads were there, and it's just all white.
Yeah.
And now you're doing this and on tour with this guy. It's like insane, right? So kind of like that stacking thing. Like it's just like it started with just even some photographers and creators that were just in the area or traveling and meeting, growing, and then those relationships, everybody ended up doing really cool things.
That sounds really
crazy,
exciting
yeah.
when you see that someone that is established in the industry and they look at your design and get excited about it enough to say, yeah, I do want to wear it, and yeah, I want to give this a shot.
Yeah.
That must be euphoric.
I think one of the best feelings is definitely seeing people with my designs. Like it's definitely something where it's like, because when I design, at least it's very personal. It's very like, hey, like this is what I would wear, or I would see somebody wearing. And every time that somebody buys something, it's like, wow, like they believe in the same thing as me, right? Like I spent all this time on the computer, like just sketching and creating the concept and creating the idea for the season. And it's like, wow, like this person gets it and they're buying something, and this means something enough where they're willing to purchase it and wear it and like tag us and all of that, right? So it's something very special where it's almost like I guess like in almost every creative field, it's like somebody, like if you're like a movie producer and you know somebody's going to go watch your movie, or if you're an artist and somebody's going to your concert, or just downloading your album. But I think for clothing, it's like it's a similar journey, but just a little bit more lengthy and sometimes more expensive sometimes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You said something which I found fascinating. You don't follow the typical old school model with your clothing brand in terms of releasing by seasons.
I think a part of me is also like is always very conscious of like how much we produce. And I think of it like, you're buying stuff that is to last and is timeless, right? So it's like even if you continue to buy every season, you're buying things that will be there forever, and you can wear 2 years down the line. And you're especially when it comes to denim, you know, like one of the reasons that we're in denim is because it's so timeless and you can wear it forever. And it's almost like design. I think good design is meant to be worn for a long time, or that significant period of time, and it's like it would be a waste to just design for a season. You know, it's just like such a short period of time, right? And especially when you're starting out, I think a lot of people feel the pressure of, hey, like I have to keep up with the seasons. I have to do spring, summer. I have to do fall, winter. I have to be on season for this trade show. And I think I've always thought of it like, well, whenever I feel these kind of internal pressures, it's actually not internal. It's actually like all this external noise, right? It's all this like, wow, like I have to do this in my life because this is like, but it's not really your blueprint, right? Like it's really just like this entire world's telling you this is your blueprint of life. Like, oh, like you must follow this season and all these things. So whenever I feel that pressure, I ask myself, like, is this really my internal voice, or is this really the external noise just like telling me things that's like trying to influence it? So for me, it was just something like internally, I just knew like that's not really why I started to make clothing. I started clothing because I wanted something that would be made forever or timeless in a sense. And it wasn't a pressure of, oh, I'm going to just make fall, winter, spring, summer clothes. It was, I wanted to, in the simplest way to describe the brand, when I say it's like, we make clothing that makes you feel like a king, it's really something that's timeless and it is forever.
Beyond just the clothing aspect of it, I think it translates into personal life. I mean, I can't relate to the whole fashion thing. I'm not in this industry, but just hearing you say that, is that the external noise or is that coming from within? I mean, that shit is deep, man.
Yeah.
That is deep, because I do ponder that a lot. And I mean, we shared a few stories before we were turning on the cameras, and I think for the first half of my life, I listened to all the noise around me. And it wasn't until one day I'm sitting down in the office and I'm going, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm not happy. I had my bagel here. I had my pizza here on this desk. And now it's nighttime. I want to go home, but I can't because I'm not done. And I'm sitting here. My butt hurts from sitting all day, and I'm not happy. My eyes hurt because I've been staring at a screen. What am I doing? Would the 6-year-old me be happy with the 12-year-old me, with the 15-year-old? Like, am I selling out? Or like, why am I not happy right now? And how did I end up here? By listening to all the external noise.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with anyone that's feeling lost in life, to use that as a compass, it's so crucial. And you're only freaking 23, which that's what blows my mind, because a lot of it took me 30 years to figure that out. And I guess you must have figured it out because you dropped out of college too. And we have a similar upbringing where we both come from immigrant Fujianese parents, and that's dropping out of school is it's not it. Sentence. To go against that and have a parent support, that's unexpected.
Yeah, I think there's something in terms of, though, I feel like even in Asian parents where they just want what's, especially Asian parents, they want what's best for you, but they, it's their belief of what's best for you, right? It's also like their context, like, and for a lot of Asian parents, they don't necessarily have a context of if fashion will make money, especially if they're like, let's say a seamstress, or like they've come from like the factory back end, and they're like, well, factories barely make money. And
right. Where each piece that they knit or so put together, it's like they get a few cents per piece. Yeah.
So I think the context is like, their points of reference of success, or their role models of what they believe success is maybe that doctor or that lawyer, right, in so and so's family or something like that. And when they see this form of success, that's when they're like, hey, like this is what my son should do, or this is what my daughter should do. So having more role models, or like people that are kind of their point of context for that success, I think helps influence that tremendously. I think also, though, once they feel like and can see kind of this sense of, wow, like you're not just going to give up on this after a year, right? And I think
they're like, this is not a phase for you. They knew it was the real deal Holyfield.
Yeah. So I think for me, it was just like they just saw me going at it every single day, nonstop, to the point where they're like, okay, like he's not gonna do school. He's like, this is what he wants to do, and like he's so serious about this. Like it's nothing like we say is gonna stop this. And he's not exactly out here selling drugs. Right.
It could be worse.
Could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it stuck out to them, and I think also like when I got to a certain point, I just started really thinking of it like where I started expressing and communicating it to them more, like this is what I want to do, and this is these are like the goals and like how I'm gonna get there, right? And I think that communication really opened up a different path for me. Because they understood like, okay, like you're actively trying to find a way and not sitting there.
You're not all talk. You're actually showing a proof of concept.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because a lot of people, they do that route and they feel like they have it mapped out in their heads. But I think what you said there was communication. I mean, in our lives, in our relationships, whether it's within our families or our friends or our relationships, it's very important that we help educate someone to understand our plan, because their intention may not be the best for us. So we kind of have to put it back on them and explain to them why this does work.
Especially when, if your parents, like immigrant parents, they've been working their entire lives. Yeah. So they don't know the concept of actually owning something and working, at it. But if they had that reference, then they could fully understand, like if you're trying to explain to them. But if I said, like, I tell my parents, like, I want to be a filmmaker, and they say, that's not going to work. they don't know any like Asian filmmakers except from people from Hong Kong, you know, in China.
Yeah.
They don't know any Asian filmmakers in the US. So they don't really have a point of reference. So I kind of understand where they're coming from.
They don't know what's possible.
Yeah.
You know, especially like if, you know, for my parents and stuff, they're running a restaurant, right? And they're working super hard. So, and they're taking all this risk, like they're starting their own business, and of course they're entrepreneurial in the sense of like this is for a better life, and but their point of context of that is just a restaurant. So if you know, if you tell them today, like if I told them today, hey, I'm gonna go start a restaurant, they're like, why would you do that? You know,
right?
And you know, just because of their context of their life story, right? And they don't have that life story of somebody that maybe had at scale like 15 restaurants, 30 restaurants, right? And if they did, then maybe they would be like, yeah, like let's start 15 restaurants, you know? And so for me, I think I had to find those early reference points for myself. And then I had to put myself up to that standard where it was like, hey, like this is what you want me to do, but I'm going to be able to do the same, if not more, and show them that there's an unlimited upside in what I'm doing. And it is for the long term and not just something that I'm going to quit, you know, on. And I think most parents, like once they realize you're not going to quit on it, they're just like, okay, you know,
they have no choice but to support you.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know. I just find that like very inspiring to hear. And I do think times are changing. I mean, my parents, if I told them I were opening up a restaurant, and my dad did the restaurant business thing too, as you know, and he would tell me like, you're absolutely crazy. Why would you put yourself through that? It's a tough, and especially now. And I want to touch on that. I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Yeah. I mean, COVID, it's not an easy time for anyone in the service industry, entertainment industry. You see Broadway, I mean, right up the block, Broadway, all those plays, all shut down. Restaurants are closed. Outdoor seating, but it's code right now, so good luck with that. Yeah. And in the garment district, was so many people here that my friends and people that I used to work with, they're no longer here. They've been replaced with hotels, WeWork buildings. I mean, the garment district is certainly changing. Yep. And now you throw COVID on top of all that. I mean, how challenging has this time frame been to kind of grow your business and keep things afloat during these tough times for the fashion industry in particular?
So I was very lucky in the sense of I had I think I built up a support structure of friends and people around me, and I kind of saw the early signs of this happening. So I saw, you know, China shutting down really early on, and then I just saw like from January they started shutting down already, and then Chinese New Year happens, and March they still shut down.
Right, we had the extended closures last year in Chinese New Year.
Yeah. So I think like seeing what my factories in China was going through, I was already kind of aware like, wow, this is going to be a huge impact, you know. Nobody, of course, could really predict like, hey, like is this going to happen? Like, are the shutdowns going to happen in the U.S.? Is it going to be as bad? But I think like just seeing that, I was able to anticipate it. And I think, you know, it's really important when you're running a business that to not just be in the business, but also be able to anticipate, right? Like I think anticipation of what's next is what keeps you nimble. It's what keeps the business growing. And, you know, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So it's like that sort of really stuck out to me where I'm seeing, you know, if you can see one side of the world, something happening, then, you know, it's very likely it may happen over here. So being aware of that, I think we were able to anticipate that fairly well. And we got super, we also, I think with I would call it luck, but I think I would actually call it like a very stubborn, we had a very stubborn aesthetic. So we had an aesthetic that would always be, for the past like 2-3 years, we've been selling face masks. And it was like, we've had cotton face masks on our site, and it was kind of like this cool, like futuristic ninja, you know, vibe. And I had like vegan python face masks and things like that. And that was just like, oh, wow, like this is our style. And at first, you know, during the November, December months, I was just like, oh, it's holiday season. We're selling through more face masks. Great, cool. people maybe are adopting to this trend.
Oh, you didn't even know.
It wasn't. It was pre-COVID.
It was pre-COVID. It was
Pre-COVID.
pre-COVID. So, and then as this happened, and you know, we had like these disposable black masks that you see on our website now. Like that was actually like when I first went to China like 2-3 years ago, I was just buying them. You know, I was just buying them and wearing them. Like if you look on my Instagram feed now, like in 2017, 2018, I'm wearing these face masks, and it was just part of what my style was. So we had a bunch of stock of this, and people were asking me, where do you get these masks? So I was just giving them out with orders on our site. And then very quickly it became something where it was like, wow, like this is a very high demand thing, right? Like in March, and especially with the cost of disposables and everything going up. I think at one point I saw on eBay and Amazon, it was like $3 to $6 a single disposable mask.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was super crazy. So we were like, well, like, yeah, like this is, and I think in times of like, I would say like tough or like, rough times, you try to figure out like, hey, like how do you do more for others than like others may ever do for you, in a sense? Like how do you deliver more value, right? And for me, it started with just like sending these masks to customers in the February months. Then it became like, okay, like let's do like a let's just give out like as many as possible. But that caught on so fast that we're like, well, this is not actually possible because we're a small business. Just give out all these masks. And at one point I remember just ordering masks that were like 90 cents, 95 cents, 90 cents a unit on cost average for disposable. So we set the price at basically $1 in case that it jumps up. Of course, though, like what really happened in a sense was like, hey, like we picked up so much traction for this, right? And then from that traction, we were like, whoa, like now we're purchasing bigger quantities. And then as COVID is going down, it just was like, it just kept, so we were like, oh, like, okay, now it's like 80 cents. And then that's when we were like, okay, well, that gives us some room to actually donate some of the masks, right? So we were able to start donating, and we donated about, I think we're 25,000 on track to do 50K by the end of the year, and in donations of masks. And we were like, and I think from there, we kind of just saw like, this demand is still there. There's such a shortage, right? In this, and I just saw like really cheap masks. Honestly, I saw like 3-plies that were like super cheap, and the quality was just not there. I saw like really disturbing stuff. We've even ordered batches, you know, that had like, I saw a bug in like a batch that we ordered from like a random third-party vendor one time, and we just rejected it. So we're like, this is a problem, right? And I've been in like manufacturing and import export beforehand, and you know, we were supplying. I had extra masks that I was actually sending to China to my factories, and then when it became reversed, they were like, "Hey, like, do you need masks?"
Right.
They were like, "Yes, we do need masks."
Oh wow.
Yeah. So you know, it was always like looking out for like that the people around us, and then it became like a reverse, you know, and that was really important, especially because our business
and that
definitely
helped sustain your business during this time.
Yeah, our business dropped like 90% during COVID, you know, and not just across like just A Kings, but like also just in like manufacturing and things like that too. So it was definitely like a huge hit, and the other 10% was like late vendors paying, you know.
Right.
So
and that's it was a major shutdown in China.
Yeah,
and it was impossible to get anything out at one point, and then
super hard.
When you could, you were limited.
Yeah, so it was super limited, like you were saying earlier before we got on. It was like I think it was like 100 kgs a day. There was like one plane going up sometimes a day for certain regions. The warehouses were overloaded, right? And we were just like, well, like this is something that we can help with. And I think during like times like that, it's like some people can just, you know, sit at home and eat Cheetos in a sense, and just be like, hey, like I'm gonna wait till the world recovers. But for me, it's just like what we're doing is like a part of my life. It's so deep into my life where it's like I cannot just sit there. I tried.
You can't be idle.
I can't be idle. So I was like, man, I got to do something. Even if it's like there's like, even if it's just like not fashion, like in a sense immediately. But it just so happened, like it just lined up so weirdly in a good way for me, because we had a medical pop-up the Q4 of last year. So it was like, I think in November, we got this Brabus G-Wagon, and we made it into an ambulance truck, and we had like a medical pop-up on Allen Street. And we were like, man, like how cool would it be to make masks? And we looked into it literally right before COVID, and it was like, man, the minimum was so freaking high to make like your own mask. So it was just like, oh, I guess like this is not gonna happen. Let's just make pill containers with M&Ms in them, with custom M&Ms in them, right? And So I always was like, oh, like what is the silver lining in this? Like what's beautiful about this moment, right? And I was like, wow, like now there's such a huge demand that I can actually make my own mask.
What inspired that? Was it like any Naruto or any ninja? Your mask in Akeem is right there as soon as you open the door, right behind me. And I was like, holy shit, man, it looks nice. And I went through my mind. I was like, number one, is it functional? And number two, because usually as you with fashion or luxury, high fashion, it's usually style over comfort and functionality.
Yeah, I think I designed for function a lot of the times because, you know, like for me, you know, I'm very aware of our costs, like what our retail price is, and like I just feel like it'd be a waste if it wasn't functional, right? And but I will say though, like in the beginning, you know, it definitely was like, hey, this is a cool vegan python mask or like a python mask. Like it's not really like there was no like, hey, like let's go stop SARS with this mask. Because this is 2-3 years ago. There's no context for like, is SARS serious, especially over here versus Hong Kong. So it started as an aesthetic thing. And I think now more than ever, people are really conscious of like the value of things and like how long this will be used, right? So now I think it's kind of considering like, hey, like if you're gonna wear a disposable but you don't want to wear a blue disposable or even a black disposable and you want to still look good, right? Like I think your wife was saying like you have to up your mask game. Like, it's like this is a way to up your mask game, and it's a reusable cover, right?
Because the whole outfit be right, and then you wear the traditional disposable mask. The way it was explained to me and the way I took it was like, all right, I get it. I mean, it wasn't on my radar because this mask thing is still very fresh. I just feel like, you know, I'm not thinking about style. I'm thinking about number one, comfort, and if it works. And if it works, I'm good. Functionality. So, but then I did, when that kind of just shattered my whole concept of it. I'm like, wait a minute. I started looking at it like shoes. Like, you know, you can have a great suit on, and if you're wearing the wrong shoes for the suit, it just totally throws off the whole outfit. So that's why she was like, you gotta step your mask game up. And I totally got it.
I like to say I was ahead of the curve because when I was in Hong Kong, everyone was wearing a mask just for functionality, just for safety, health reasons. And then I thought to myself, it would be cool if they actually made something like a mask for fashion, because at that time I didn't know that was a thing. And this was like last year, 2 years ago. And I went to Bathing Ape, and I went inside and I was like, whoa, this mask is cool with the teeth and the graffiti, the design. I want to pick it up. And that's how I got into it. I was like, it wasn't really like I bought it for functionality, but then I had it. I had something to cover my mouth with, like during COVID.
So how do you move on from here?
I think we're still adapting, you know, like I think the one advantage that we have is we're able to be very nimble, especially as a smaller company, right? Then, so for me, I think when, you know, there's kind of different phases, especially a lot of people that are going through this, right? There's that phase where maybe you can very easily sink into depression and you're like, man, like this is what's happening. Why is this happening? Right. And
play that victim mindset.
You can definitely
let the anxiety control you.
Yeah. And I think like everybody goes through that phase, but what's really important is like once you get through that phase and you have to come through a phase of acceptance. You have to kind of accept like, hey, this is what's going on. And this is you know, and some people take that acceptance a lot earlier than others, you know, some there's and hopefully they do, because I think once you get past that and you go into acceptance, you get to this phase where you start thinking of like, okay, like let's create, you know, like, and I think the most beautiful part is like there is a lot of creation going on right now. As much as there's, you know, all these businesses shutting down, like all these old companies that are like bankrupt and turning over, and companies cutting losses, like a lot of these new companies, and especially our company, we're thinking about like what's next and what are we going to create, what are we bringing into this world. And I think creation is what is progress, right? It's what moves the world forward, and it's also productivity. And you know, we definitely need as much creation as possible right now. And I think when you get to that creation part, right, you're no longer thinking of the depression or like that victim mindset, and you're no longer, you've already accepted this, but now you're like, hey, like I need to move forward. And for me, that creation has been like thinking about the health, definitely health a lot more. So, you know, I've been, you know, I kind of went through that period of similar to what you're saying, but for your corporate job and you sitting on that desk. But I was like, man, like, is this what I thought my body would be at 23? Like, you know, like, no, like my 15-year-old me would not be proud of this body. And, you know, and I think it's really important to always like remeasure and figure out, you know, what points of your life you want to really work on. And so I've been, because I've been going to the gym a lot more, I'm like, man, you know what? I need to make some gym wear. I need to make active wear. I need to do, you know, I need to do something that also is for this new lifestyle that I've adapted into mine. And surprisingly, a lot of people have been messaging me like, hey, like, when is this dropping? When is this releasing?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think leisure wear is a huge market.
Yeah.
Huge market. I mean, back then it was taboo to just wear, I mean, you and I are kind of wearing sweatpants-ish, cargo. And back then it was taboo to wear it as a, you know, it's comfortable, man. I love it. And it's fashionable now. So it's something that I like to mix, and it's versatile. You can mix it with so many different type of textures. It's forgiving in the sense of style. So, I mean, I think going into, a lot of people are looking for that perfect marriage between fashion and comfort. Right? They don't want to sacrifice one or the other. You know, you don't want to be comfortable but look like a slob. Right? But you don't want to look awesome but be uncomfortable for the whole day. So finding that perfect marriage, I think, is key. So yeah, leisure wear, the market, I believe it's gone up like tremendously. I basically see almost every major brand has moved into it or looking into it.
I think I'm planning, so I'm prototyping some stuff right now, and I think we should have like the initial spring summer, like kind of like initial samples and maybe like a soft launch. I have an idea for the soft launch, and we're gonna so how I usually do it, I always like to test first. So the soft launch would probably be, you know, like much smaller, current audience, and seeing how does it perform, you know. And we did this with our denim too when we first launched, where it was like, hey, like, let's see the wear and tear on this denim. Like, how is this really gonna last somebody? And we did like soft tests with a bunch of random people, customers, friends and family. And I think we're gonna do something very similar, but maybe definitely on a slightly larger scale than before, because we have a slightly larger platform now, you know. So I think we're gonna try to shoot for spring summer, but of course, you know, like I actually don't really rush a lot of things. So if right now I'm just doing personal samples, testing it, and then maybe a few others for like friends and family to test, and then we'll see. But I think most likely, like, by summer we should have it.
There's a lot of attention to detail and planning to go in to pursue something that you're passionate about, and monetizing it, that middle story, that you know, the ups and downs.
Man, I think that there's definitely a lot of failures or lessons learned, in a sense of failures being in terms of, like, I think early on we didn't do as much testing, and I think you can fall in love with your products really easily, and you don't really who you really need to fall in love with is more your customer. You know, it's not like when you make a product, right? It's like, or a company or your service or whatever you're selling, you're like, man, like, this is my baby, right? And you know, nobody thinks their baby is ugly, right? So it's like
facts.
Yeah, so it could be the ugliest thing in the world, but like, you're like, man, like, this is my baby, like, it's like most beautiful, most gorgeous, handsome baby there is. And I think one of the biggest lessons for me was I definitely had a couple of designs that I, you know, looking back, I'm like, man, like, those are definitely those babies where I thought were super handsome and maybe we're not it. And I was so confident on it, and I bet on them. And when you bet on those things, and you know, I could be wrong too. Maybe we didn't bring it to market fast enough. Maybe we didn't get enough eyeballs on it. We didn't get the right target audience on it, and all these other factors. But I think for me, there was definitely times I was like, man, like, maybe I could have tested this and or I could have failed faster. You know, maybe I could have tested this, known right away, and pivoted a little bit more, like, okay, like, this is not working, let's try something else, instead of being so stubborn on it, like, okay, like, this is still my baby, I'm gonna grow. And
did you ever find success with something where you thought it was a failure, and you go, maybe if I just did a little tweak here, or put it out to a different market, or try a different strategy in release? Did you ever try that? And then did you find a different result, or was it the same?
So I think there's always like a 2 millimeter difference, right? There's always like a small tweak that you can do for some things, and you can learn like maybe it's a different target market, or maybe it's like a different idea. Like maybe there's like a different angle that you're not seeing right now that somebody else needs to see. But that's usually people are blinded by the product. You know, they're like, hey, like this is my idea. Like this is for this target consumer, right? And they don't see that other consumer. So I think it took an evolution process and a growth process for me to even think of those things. You know, in the beginning, it was definitely like very like, hey, this is what I want to make, and that's it. And then now there's a little bit more tweaking, and there's a little bit more testing that goes into that thought process. And there's I think it comes with you learning and adjusting. Right. And in the beginning, though, it's not something that's everybody picks up on. And I wouldn't expect anybody to come out of the gate just knowing that.
Right. Is there something that, you know, things that you can let the audience know, like to identify? Because I know like when you're creating something, like even with film and stuff like that, the final product that we show the audience, it's to the public. It's not the first vision. It's not the first version.
No, there's so many edits
honestly,
along the way.
like we made a horror film. We probably had like 20 revisions on it. It was crazy. But yeah, how do you identify like, okay, we understand, okay, this is not something's working. So how do we tweak it?
So I think you have to be like really open to tweaking it, right? Like, so for me, it's always like, if you think about a movie, like this is the ending of the movie, right? Like what is your ending of the movie? You know that this is your ending. Like if it's going to be like you start this brand, or you start this company, and this is what you want to do, and this is what fulfills you, or whatever it is that ending is, you need to know that your plot can change, right? And you need to be open to that plot, because if you believe that like this plot is always going to be the same and it must be this way, you're never really going to get to your ending, right? Like if you believe like this scary movie or this horror film that you're making, it must be shot in this way and this way only, the chances are it may never actually happen, because there's so many things that come up along the way. And being flexible to the plot changing is something that some people are really difficult at accepting, you know, and the sooner that you know that you have to flow and figure out those changes and small things along the way, I think the sooner that you'll, start realizing like everything's just happening, you know.
Right, it's meant to move in this direction, not that, because of what's available. But how do you know when to walk away from it then? Like, you know what, this is not working. I need to walk away, like abandon ship. And after all the hard work and falling in love with it, to walk away, how do you know? What are some of those signs?
I think for me, I ask myself like what fulfills me, like what if I was to die tomorrow, or like, hey, like if I'm gonna die when I'm 80, or like there's a rocking chair concept actually, which is kind of like, hey, like if I'm 80 years old and I'm in this rocking chair, like will I regret not doing this, right? And I make a lot of decisions off of that concept, and for me, like I think walking away would probably be one of those things I would ask myself, like, hey, if I'm 80 years old and I walk away from what I'm doing right now, this moment, will I regret it? And if that answer is yes, like even a slight yes, like faintly, like, oh, like I probably would, then I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna stay, right? But if that answer is like, oh, I wouldn't regret it, like fuck it, I'm starting something new, I have so much more, there's another chapter in my life, then I would walk away from it, you know?
Right. I mean, there's so many people, you know, you are definitely in the minority in terms of the way you think and the way you follow up with how you think, right? A lot of people may think in that way, but won't be able to move in that direction. They'll be stuck in the analyzing phase, right? Where they're in a fork in the road and they're weighing the pros and cons and regrets, or whatever moves them. It's either love or fear, right? And I see that you seem to move more towards self-love, right? Where a lot of others would move towards fear. They make the decision based on what will hurt less. They run away from the fear, right? Rather than running towards love, they run away. And that'll base the decisions for most of life. That's why most of us end up playing it safe, right? Yeah. So that's why I found it so fascinating to when Norm brought you in front of me and he told me your story and how young you were and looked at everything you did. I was just like, this is incredible. I want to know. I kind of want to pick your brain and what kind of nurture that. Like, why do you move towards love instead of running away from fear, and how you base your decision making?
Yeah. So I think for me, all of the experiences that I've had in my life, I've realized that uncertainty of, or this fear that comes from this uncertainty of what's going to happen next is really where I grow, and where other people tend to grow as well, right? So when you ask yourself like, hey, like why am I leaning towards college or this job versus dropping out or quitting this job and pursuing what I want to do, a lot of that tends to be the answer of comfort, or hey, this is what I know, right? And it's a sense of certainty of this is what's going to happen for me. And what I really realized is in the sense of uncertainty, and I go into an example where I just went skydiving last week, and I just remember, this deep sense of like nervousness, like what the fuck did I just sign up to? I'm signing initially all these forms, like, oh man, like initial here, you may die, playing in the background, like, oh, like, this is not, oh, no skydiver is 100% safe. Right. No parachute is 100% safe. I think for me though, like in those sense of uncertainty, right? I try to stack certainty. I try to find those things that will grow my confidence in what I'm headed into, right? So in that moment of skydiving, I just saw everybody that was jumping. I saw them landing, and I was like, wow, like everybody's landing, nobody's breaking their legs. And I'm like, what am I really hearing? And I'm hearing these skydivers, the professional tandem jumpers, and they're like, hey, I do like 15 jumps a day. I do about 3,500. Everybody here does about 2,500 to 3,500 jumps in a year minimum before they even do tandem jumps with you. I was like, wow. So these guys are doing 10 to 15 jumps a day. Their legs are still fine. Nothing's crazy has happened to them. They're not,
they're not limping.
They're not limping, right? And so, people say success leaves clues. And for me, I was like, wow, like this is very successful in skydiving. You've not broken any legs. You're perfectly fine. I can model after you, right? And I always look for those things. I look like, who do I model after? Like what are they successful in? Like what made them successful? And like, how do I model after them? So for me, I was like, okay, like I found my role model for this skydiving incident. And, during the skydiving, people say like, hey, like nervousness and excitement is just 2 degrees apart, right? Like when you feel nervous and when you feel excitement, it's really the same feeling. It's like that same stomach.
They're cousins.
Yeah, they're like the same thing.
It's
but
like
you just have
madness and genius.
yeah. You just have to make that little shift, right? So I tried to, didn't really work. I tried to make it like, oh, I'm excited for what's going to come, even though I'm like, what the fuck? I'm about to jump out this plane. And I'm going up. And I just remember once I get there and it's like, okay, I'm 10,000 feet in the air. I got to do it. I'm just looking I'm at the edge of the plane. I got to do it. So when they say 3, 2, and then just boom, like I'm out of the plane and I'm suddenly upside down looking at the plane. I'm like, oh fuck, I really just jumped out of this plane. And as I recorrect and I'm facing the ground, and I'm freaking out a little bit still. I'm in panic, right? Like, and it's kind of like when you jump and make that first move, when you're uncertain about something and you're going to have that sense of panic, or you're going to have that sense of, oh fuck, what did I just get myself into? If you quit your job or leave school. And for me, what I realized though was like, hey, like, you know what? A couple seconds later, the parachute opens. Once the chute opens, right, there's this sense of just not necessarily stillness, but it jerks you back up, and then you're like, wow, this is the moment. This is what's happening. And in that moment, I was so present, and I just looked at everything, and I was like, wow, like, you know what? Like, this is what it is, and I started appreciating everything. And in that sense, when I jumped, that uncertainty and all of those like that nervousness that was building up in me. I was like, wow, like I did it. I already made the first jump, right? It's the hardest part is already over, and now there's a sense of appreciation. So I think a lot of that understanding of like, you know, any time I'm uncertain, the moment I do it, there's going to be that sense of panic or that sense of like, what the fuck did I just get myself into sometimes? But you know, the chute is always going to open, right? And you know, like there's just a sense of faith in you as a person that I've developed and kind of like come to realize like that in that moment, the chute opens and you just appreciate the process and you're like, wow, like this is happening. I'm falling. I'm going to land. And for me, that's in any part of life's journey where it's like, wow, like the chute is going to open and then I'm going to appreciate the whole process before I land and to wherever I'm trying to get to. Right. And that landing was like, I just knew that landing was going to be so soft. And it was so strange to say because, you know, you're falling 10,000 feet. And as I'm getting closer to the ground and the guy's like, hey, we're going to fall on our butt, like lift your legs up. I'm like, like this is going to be a really soft landing. And I was like, wow, like, you know, that sense of faith and appreciation for that whole process was just certainty and stacking. You know, it was that whole mind mentality, like from the moment where I was like, hey, success leaves clues, these people are landing and all these, and this tandem jumpers jumped so many times before me. I look at that in all the things that I'm uncertain of in life, whether it's like starting a new venture, like trying something new, like who did it before me? Like there's gotta be examples or role models, right? Like it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel. And even if it's not necessarily the same thing, there's gotta be, different moments in everybody's lives that you can find connections to. And I always try to find those connections and bridge them together. Right. And, I think that sense of, I think faith for me is one thing that definitely drives why I move towards, love, over comfort. I think the other thing is there's a side of me that I think about, you know, when people say that, how you play games is how you play life. It's really like when I remember just growing up playing games and I always was like, I'm going to win. Like I knew the end goal was I'm going to win this game. Right. And for me, that was just almost like a sense of faith. It was a sense of confidence. Like, and you know, when you play games and you win, it could be the easiest game, but then you're stacking confidence. Right. So I always just kept stacking that.